His absence is not your downfall, it's your awakening. When someone walks away from your life, especially someone you once believed was irreplaceable, it often feels like the ground beneath you has given out. The mind clings to what was familiar and the heart aches for what once felt like home. You start to question your worth, your identity, your choices. You begin to wonder what you did wrong, what you could have done differently, and if there's even the slightest chance that they might come back. But here's the truth. Most people avoid confronting. They're not coming back. And that's not the curse. It's the cure. The very moment someone exits your life, especially when it's unexpected or unwelcome, you're left standing in a kind of emotional stillness. And in that stillness, you find something most people miss: yourself. You begin to recognize that the one thing holding you back was not their love or their presence. It was your attachment, your belief that your life's fulfillment was somehow tied to their return. But when they don't come back, when the silence becomes louder than their voice ever was, you're forced to face the mirror and rebuild. There is immense power in absence. It is in the vacuum left behind that the true shape of your soul begins to emerge. You start seeing things more clearly, not just about them, but about yourself. You begin to understand what you accepted in the name of love, what you tolerated because you feared being alone, and what you sacrificed because you didn't know how powerful you were on your own. The version of you that was waiting for someone to come back was not your highest self. It was your conditioned self. Conditioned to believe that you needed validation, love, or closure from another person to feel whole. But in their absence, you are invited to unlearn that story. This is where awakening happens. Not in joy, but in pain. Not in certainty, but in confusion. The tears you shed are not a sign of weakness. They're evidence that something inside you is cracking open, something deeper than just heartache. It's the death of illusion. The illusion that your happiness depends on someone else staying. The illusion that your story was supposed to unfold a certain way. When that illusion dies, you begin to breathe again. But this time, the air is different. It's your own. And you don't awaken all at once. It's subtle. Maybe you stop checking your phone every hour. Maybe you go one whole day without wondering where they are, what they're doing. Maybe you look in the mirror and see someone stronger looking back. It doesn't feel like a victory at first. It just feels like silence. But in that silence, your inner voice grows louder. The voice you once ignored. The one that tells you that you deserve more. The one that knows your potential. The one that knows this loss wasn't your ending. It was your invitation to rise. The person who left did not take your future with them. They only took the chapter they were meant to be in. The story doesn't end there. In fact, it begins there. Because real power is found not when you hold on, but when you release. Letting go is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's you recognizing that someone else's decision does not define your destiny. You define your destiny by what you choose to do next. And what you do next becomes the turning point. You stop asking, why did they leave? And you start asking, what am I meant to learn? That's the shift. That's when healing begins. That's when you stop waiting at a closed door and start building a new one. And here's the secret most people never grasp. What looks like rejection is often redirection. What feels like abandonment is actually alignment. It's life in its infinite intelligence clearing the path for who you're meant to become. Because as long as you were holding on to what was lost, you were limiting what could be found. It hurts, yes. It's confusing, it's heavy. But that weight you feel is the pressure that forms diamonds. You are in the fire, yes, but not to burn. You are in it to be forged, to be shaped, to emerge. This is your becoming. Their absence stripped you of the distractions, of the emotional noise, of the external reliance, and left you alone with your essence. And in that essence, you are finally free to ask, who am I when no one else is watching? The answer to that question is the real treasure. You don't need closure from them because the real closure is in your clarity. The clarity that says, I am still here. I am still breathing. I am not broken. I am building. You rise not because someone came back. You rise because someone left. And you finally realize that the real love you were searching for was within you all along. Every emotional void holds the blueprint for personal power. When someone you deeply care for leaves, it creates a silence that echoes louder than any goodbye. It's a kind of silence that stretches into your thoughts, into your soul, into the very fabric of your identity. That silence feels like abandonment, like something is missing, like you're no longer whole, but in that hollow space, there is something rare and powerful. A doorway into your next evolution, a doorway into the strength you didn't know you had, because when you stop waiting for their return, when you stop hoping for something to come back that was never meant to stay, you finally begin to return to yourself. We often define ourselves through the people we love. We wrap our identity around them. We build routines, futures, expectations. And when they leave, they don't just walk away with their own baggage. They take the structure we built around them with them. And what's left? Rubble. Emotional rubble. Pieces of a dream that didn't work out. Pieces of a version of you that no longer makes sense. And that moment, that very moment when you're staring at what's left, wondering what to do next, that's the beginning of self-mastery. Because emotional pain is a signal. It's a message from within. It's your soul telling you there is more. Not more suffering, more growth, more depth, more understanding. But the problem is we spend so much time resisting pain that we miss the gift inside it. We numb it. We distract from it. We romanticize the past. We cling to memories. We go back and reread old messages, hoping to feel something familiar. But healing doesn't happen in memory. It happens in movement. It happens when you shift your gaze from what's gone to what's possible. Self-mastery begins when you decide not to run from pain, but to walk through it with awareness. When you become curious instead of bitter. When you ask yourself, why did I give so much to someone who couldn't receive it? Instead of, why did they leave me? There is power in taking ownership. Not blame, but ownership. Because once you take ownership of your emotions, your reactions, your choices, you take back control. You move from being at the mercy of life to being the author of your experience. The person you were when you were in that relationship or when you were waiting for them to come back was not your highest self. That version of you may have been loving, caring, devoted, but also dependent, afraid, maybe even lost in who they were instead of who you were becoming. And that's okay, because now you see it. And when you see it, you can grow from it, you can transform it, you can rise above it. The emotional void they left is not empty, it's fertile. It's sacred ground for your transformation. You get to decide what grows there. You get to rebuild not the same structure you had before, but something stronger, something rooted in your truth. You begin to explore your needs, your values, your boundaries. You start noticing what you allowed simply to keep the peace. You become aware of how often you silence your voice just to avoid conflict. And now, in their absence, your voice begins to come alive again. And here's something most people don't realize. Your transformation doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be broadcast. It's not about proving to them that you're better off. It's about proving to yourself that you never needed them to begin with. Because self-mastery is not revenge, it's remembrance. Remembering who you were before the world taught you to look outside of yourself for love. Before you tied your value to someone else's affection or attention. It's a journey back, not to the past, but to your original self, the version of you that was whole before the wound. The pain you feel right now, it's not the enemy, it's the tool. It's the fire that forges you. It's the pressure that reveals the diamond inside. But it only works if you let it, if you stop running from it, if you sit with it, breathe into it, and ask it what it's trying to teach you. That's where growth lives. Not in escaping your feelings, but in understanding them, naming them, facing them. When you stop waiting for them to return, you stop outsourcing your healing. You stop believing that your peace is in someone else's hands. You stop giving away your power to someone who already walked away. And you begin to see that your healing isn't just about moving on, it's about moving inward. You don't just get over someone. You get back to you, the real you. The you that was hidden beneath the compromise, beneath the fear, beneath the longing. And the deeper you go into that version of yourself, the more unstoppable you become. That emotional void, it's not a hole to be filled by someone else. It's a space to be filled by you. Your purpose, your passion, your fire. Because once you begin to master your emotions, you begin to master your destiny, not by pretending the pain isn't real, but by realizing it's the very thing leading you home. Negative feelings are not permanent. They are passageways to clarity, growth, and a deeper connection with your true identity. But when you're in the middle of the pain, it doesn't feel like a passage. It feels like you're drowning. The weight of sadness, regret, rejection, and confusion can be overwhelming. It consumes your thoughts, disturbs your sleep, and clouds your perspective. It's hard to see beyond the present moment because everything in you is aching for relief, for answers, for peace. And yet, what you don't see immediately is that this discomfort, this darkness, is not here to destroy you. It's here to develop you. Pain has a way of forcing you to slow down. You stop running, you stop pretending, and you start listening to yourself. You begin to hear the voice you've been ignoring, the voice that was whispering truth to you all along. When you were chasing after someone who didn't value you, that voice was there. When you stayed silent to keep the peace, that voice was there. When you settled for less because you were afraid of being alone, that voice was still there, but you didn't listen. And now the negative feelings that you're experiencing are amplifying that voice, making it impossible to ignore any longer. They are not random. They are signals. They are the soul's way of demanding your attention, asking you to stop escaping and start embracing the reality of where you are and what you truly need. Negative emotions don't show up to sabotage your journey. They show up to reveal what's been hidden. You begin to realize that much of the pain you're feeling is not just about what happened. It's about the expectations you created, the illusions you held onto, and the identity you built around someone else's presence. When those things collapse, what you're left with is not emptiness. You're left with truth. And truth always has a purpose. It's not easy to sit in it. It's not easy to admit that you gave more than you should have, that you ignore the red flags, that you place your self-worth in someone else's hands. But that honesty is the first step toward liberation. Most people try to bypass negative feelings. They distract themselves. They jump into another relationship. They overwork. They drink. They scroll endlessly, hoping that if they can just stay busy enough, the pain will pass on its own. But pain doesn't disappear when it's ignored. It waits. It waits for silence. It waits for the moment you're alone. And then it reminds you again and again that healing isn't found in escape. It's found in facing it head on, because every emotion, even the most painful one, carries information. It's telling you where the wound is. It's showing you where you're still holding on. It's inviting you to go deeper. You cannot truly grow until you understand yourself. And you cannot understand yourself if you're afraid of your emotions. When you begin to ask your sadness what it's trying to show you, when you question your anger without judgment, when you sit with your disappointment instead of silencing it, you gain access to parts of yourself you didn't even know were there. You begin to reconnect with your own intuition. You realize that the pain wasn't just from their absence, it was from your disconnection with yourself. And the more you sit in that awareness, the more clarity comes. You start to see what you deserve. You remember who you are. You remember what you value. You begin to recognize your patterns. And now, instead of repeating the same cycles, you start creating something new. This is the sacred work of transformation. It's not pretty. It's not easy. But it's powerful. It's the kind of growth that doesn't just change how you feel. It changes how you live. You stop chasing love and start embodying it. You stop looking for validation and start giving it to yourself. You stop needing to be chosen because you've already chosen yourself. And this all happens not in spite of the negative feelings, but because of them. Your emotions are not your enemy. They are your guide. They are the compass pointing you back home, home to your center, home to your peace. Home to the version of you that doesn't shrink, doesn't settle, and doesn't stay silent. And the deeper you go into that emotional terrain, the more you discover that the strength you were waiting for was never going to come from outside of you. It was always inside, buried under years of conditioning, fear, and doubt. And the pain simply came to uncover it. This is what most people miss. They think healing is about returning to how things used to be. It's not. Healing is about becoming someone you've never been before. Someone who doesn't fear their feelings but understands them. Someone who doesn't avoid discomfort but grows through it. Someone who walks through the fire not because they're fearless, but because they finally realize they're worth the journey. There is something sacred about solitude that most people run from. When someone leaves your life, especially someone you never imagined living without, there's a space that opens up around you, and for many, that space feels unbearable. It's in that quiet, in that emptiness, where you're forced to confront the one person you've ignored the most, yourself. In the past, you may have kept busy tending to others, pouring into them, checking in, adjusting yourself to fit what they needed. You called it love. But many times it was a form of hiding from yourself, from your wounds, from your truth. And now that they're gone, you're standing alone in front of a mirror that no longer reflects who you were, but who you're becoming. That space, that silence, it is not punishment, it is preparation. Alone doesn't mean abandoned, it means available. Available to your own energy, available to your healing, available to your power. And yet when most people find themselves alone, the first instinct is to fill the space. Another text thread, another dinner invite, another temporary connection to soften the blow. But distraction is not healing. Every time you reach out to fill the silence, you delay your own transformation. Solitude is a test, and more than that, it's a teacher. It asks questions that can't be answered in noise. Questions like, who are you without anyone clapping for you? Who are you when no one is checking in? Who are you when love isn't being offered and yet your heart still beats with hope? The truth is, solitude is the soil in which self-awareness grows. When you are no longer influenced by someone else's opinions, moods, expectations, or validation, you start to hear your own voice again. It starts soft, a whisper, a suggestion, a reminder. And the longer you stay in that space, the stronger that voice becomes. You start to feel a sense of clarity that you forgot you had access to. You remember what peace actually feels like. Not the kind of peace that comes from keeping others happy, but the kind that comes from being in alignment with yourself. There's something powerful about eating alone, walking alone, thinking alone. You're not being selfish. You're returning to yourself. You're no longer bleeding for people who wouldn't have lifted a finger for you. You're no longer confusing attention with affection. You're no longer overextending yourself to prove you're worth staying for. Because now, in this silence, you're learning that your worth was never up for negotiation. It was only obscured by your need to be seen through someone else's eyes. But when you see yourself, really see yourself, you stop shrinking. When you sit in solitude, you begin to process what really happened. Not the fantasy of what could have been, but the reality of what was. You remember the red flags. You recall the moments you were dismissed, overlooked, taken for granted. You start connecting dots you avoided when you were busy loving them. And slowly you begin to forgive yourself, not for loving, but for forgetting your own value in the process. That kind of clarity only comes when you stop the noise. When you allow yourself to be still, when you stop trying to rush to the next chapter and instead fully sit in the one you're in. There's a reason so many people fear being alone. It strips away the illusion. It removes the mask. It confronts you with truths you'd rather not deal with. But that confrontation is what transforms you. You begin to understand your patterns. You realize how many times you sacrifice your peace just to avoid the feeling of being too much or not enough. You understand how often you were performing, pretending, people-pleasing just to be chosen. And now, alone, you no longer need to perform. You can be. Just be. And in that being, you begin to rebuild from the inside out. There is no applause in solitude, no validation, no one telling you you're doing it right. That's why it's so powerful. Because it teaches you how to affirm yourself, how to cheer for your own progress, how to sit with your sadness without turning it into shame, how to face your fears without needing a savior. That's what real healing looks like. Not dependent on anyone else's presence or absence, but anchored in your own awareness. And in that awareness, you begin to notice the subtle shifts. You start setting boundaries that once terrified you. You say no without guilt. You choose peace over chaos. You choose quiet over begging to be heard. You begin to enjoy your own company, not because you're antisocial, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself for connection. You learn how to fill your own cup, and eventually, when you re-enter the world, you bring with you a different energy, an energy that doesn't chase, doesn't convince, doesn't cling. You move with a quiet confidence because now you know solitude didn't break you, it built you. There comes a moment in your healing where you stop asking why they left and start asking why you stayed so long. You begin to see that the real breakthrough wasn't in understanding them, it was in understanding yourself. And that moment, quiet as it may seem, is the beginning of a powerful shift. It's the turning point where you no longer seek closure from someone else because you begin giving yourself the clarity you were waiting on. And with that clarity comes responsibility. The responsibility to break the patterns that cause you to compromise, to overextend, to silence your intuition for the sake of being chosen. It's easy to place all the focus on what they did, the lies, the distance, the indifference, the emotional inconsistency. But healing doesn't happen when you live in blame. Healing begins when you take ownership of your part in the dynamic. And that's not self-blame, it's self-awakening. Because when you start tracing the thread backward, you begin to recognize familiar patterns. You realize that this wasn't the first time you abandoned your boundaries. This wasn't the first time you mistook attention for love. This wasn't the first time you accepted less than what you deeply desired because you didn't want to be alone. And in that realization, there's a quiet reckoning with yourself, not to punish yourself, but to wake yourself up. You see, breaking patterns requires you to be radically honest with yourself. You have to admit the parts of you that are still wounded, still waiting to be chosen, still trying to prove you're worthy of love. Maybe you grew up believing you had to earn affection. Maybe you were taught that silence keeps the peace. Maybe you were never taught how to communicate your needs. Whatever the root, the pattern was planted a long time ago, and every unhealed moment just watered it. That's why I kept repeating different faces, same cycles, and now in this season of healing, you have the opportunity to break it. But it doesn't happen through willpower alone. It happens through awareness, through presence, through the willingness to sit in the discomfort of truth. Patterns don't break when you're distracted. They break when you're present enough to notice them in real time. That moment when you feel the urge to chase someone who's pulling away, that's your pattern speaking. That instant when you want to explain yourself again just to feel understood, that's your old self searching for validation. When you feel guilt for setting a boundary or shame for walking away from something toxic, that's your inner conditioning resisting the change. But the more aware you become of these moments, the more power you gain. You begin to pause. You begin to breathe. You begin to choose differently. And each new choice, though it may feel small, is a revolution. Saying no when you used to say yes. Walking away when you used to hold on. Choosing rest over self-sacrifice. Choosing your peace over pleasing others. These decisions start stacking, and over time, they rewire your nervous system, recondition your heart, and reshape your identity. You're no longer the person who tolerates bare minimum love. You're no longer the one who fights to be seen. You become someone who simply is and who lets things go that don't serve that truth. The hardest part of breaking patterns is that it often feels unfamiliar, even unsafe. You are so used to the chaos, the highs and lows, the inconsistency, that peace feels foreign. But that's the discomfort of growth. That's the stretch. You are no longer driven by emotional survival. You are learning to live from emotional sovereignty. And emotional sovereignty is not about being cold or disconnected. It's about being whole. It's about being rooted in your truth so deeply that you no longer tolerate anything that pulls you away from it. This process takes time. You will be tempted to go back, not just to the person, but to the mindset. You'll crave the comfort of familiarity. You'll have moments where you doubt your progress. You'll question whether you're healing or just hiding. That's normal. Growth is not linear. But each time you choose the new path, each time you respond differently, each time you honor your boundary instead of breaking it, you're creating a new normal, a new standard, a new reality. And this is how the cycle ends with you, not because the other person changed, not because you got the apology, but because you became aware of your worth. Because you decided that your peace was more valuable than being accepted by people who couldn't meet you where you are. Because you saw the pattern, named it, and then rewrote the story. You didn't need anyone to save you. You became your own rescue, your own closure, your own revolution. You became the one who breaks generational patterns, the one who redefines love, the one who chooses alignment over attachment. The path to healing often requires a deep and unshakable commitment to yourself. It's about understanding that the absence of someone else in your life doesn't equate to the absence of your worth. Too often, people hinge their sense of value on someone else's presence, approval, or affection. And when that person walks away, it feels as though something inside of you has vanished, as though the space they left is too vast to fill. But in reality, the only thing that's missing isn't them. It's your connection to your own power, your own purpose, your own sense of self. This disconnection from yourself is where the true challenge lies, because when we're no longer centered in our own being, we often look to external sources to restore what we've lost. But here's the truth. Their absence is actually an invitation for you to rediscover yourself. You were never meant to be dependent on someone else's presence to validate your existence. You were designed to be whole on your own, complete with your own unique light, your own dreams, your own strengths, and your own voice. When you begin to see that the absence of someone doesn't mean the absence of your worth, you'll realize that the space left behind is not a void, but a fertile ground for growth, transformation, and self-reclamation. In that space, you can finally hear your own voice again, the one that's been drowned out by the noise of others' opinions, expectations, and demands. Reclaiming your power means stopping the cycle of seeking validation from people who never truly understood you. When someone leaves, especially someone you deeply invested in emotionally, it's easy to feel as though you were never enough. But that's the illusion. Your value was never based on their love or lack of it. Their inability to see your worth doesn't diminish it. It just means that they were never the right person to see you fully. And that's okay. There is a profound freedom in realizing that you are enough, exactly as you are, without needing someone to affirm that for you. The process of reclaiming your power begins with learning to trust yourself. It means coming back to a place of inner knowing, where you can make decisions based on what aligns with your values, not what pleases others. It's about getting quiet enough to hear your heart's desires without the noise of past disappointments clouding your judgment. Trusting yourself means you begin to value your own company. It means sitting with yourself without the need to escape into distractions and saying, I am worthy of my own love, my own attention, and my own respect. In the midst of pain, it's easy to become consumed by the questions, why did they leave? What's wrong with me? What could I have done differently? But the real breakthrough comes when you realize that the question isn't about them, it's about you. What you're really asking is, how can I show up for myself in a way that I never did before? How can I love myself as fully as I was trying to love others? When you stop seeking the answers outside of yourself and begin to find them within, you start the journey of rediscovery. You start to see how you've allowed the dynamics of past relationships to define you, and you begin to reshape your identity based on the truth of who you are, not who they told you to be. The process of healing also means learning to let go of the story you've been telling yourself. For many, the end of a relationship becomes an opportunity to reaffirm negative beliefs about themselves. I'm not good enough. I'll never find love. Or I'm always the one left behind. But these stories, though painful, are not truths. They are just interpretations of a moment in time. They're the lens through which you've viewed your worth, but they don't define who you are. Letting go of these narratives requires you to take a step back and ask yourself, what if this situation is not a reflection of my inadequacy, but a necessary step in my growth? It's in these moments of reframing that you begin to realize the richness of the lessons that this experience holds for you. Learning to let go also means releasing the attachment to an outcome. Often we attach our happiness to a specific person, a specific situation, or a specific result. But in doing so, we place our well-being in the hands of something external. When you start to let go of this attachment, you free yourself from the uncertainty and fear of not knowing what will happen next. You allow space for new experiences, new growth, and new possibilities. It's not about resigning yourself to the idea that nothing will ever be the same, but rather embracing the reality that everything is constantly evolving. You are evolving. The world around you is evolving. And every step forward is an opportunity to rediscover what's possible for your life. The final piece of reclaiming your power is taking full ownership of your future. The past, with all its wounds and disappointments, no longer has to dictate the direction of your life. You get to decide how you show up for yourself, what boundaries you will set, and how you will love yourself moving forward. No one else can give you this power. You must claim it for yourself. This means making decisions that reflect your highest good, even when it's uncomfortable. It means choosing growth over staying stuck in comfort. It means standing tall in your truth, even when others try to diminish it. And most importantly, it means choosing to believe in your own worth, not based on past experiences or external validation, but based on the unshakable truth that you are enough, always have been, and always will be.